kind of become my new degree of normalcy. Is like, I have someone to interview on Friday night. I have to roll out of bed and just make it to Friday. Like that has been my biggest motivator. And we are live. All right. So more or less, let's get cracking. Hello, makers of the world, coming to you live in spirit from I-3 Detroit in the innovative Ferndale, Michigan. This is the Make Something Wonderful podcast, exploring all the fantastic ways we create. I'm Thomas Tusano.
I'm Neil Verplank.
And he is Neil Verplank. So, he is also known as Captain Nemo of Captain Nemo's Flaming Carnival. So, Neil, welcome.
Well, thank you.
So, would you want to tell us a little bit about what, Captain Nemo's Flaming Carnival is, right off the bat here, before we start getting into specific questions?
So, Captain Nemo's Flaming Carnival is, it's an art project. It's a collaborative endeavor. I know this is surprising. It involves fire and games. So it's a burner thing. So, if you've heard of Burning Man, it stems from Burning Man. Specifically, Lakes of Fire is a Michigan regional. So I and a bunch of friends have been doing this I've been doing fire for 20 years and Captain Nemo's for 5.5 years. And so our thing is combining fire and fun and interactivity. So flaming ping pong, flaming skee ball. We've got a button that makes everything go off. We've got things that interact to music. So there's different ways that people can interact with the carnival and be part of it. And it's just an epic amount of fun. We meet almost every week, except for right now. And we make things and we entertain people.
Excellent. I think we've seen you at Maker Faire Detroit before, right? I think it's been presented there as well.
Yes, at the Henry Ford in 2017. It was awesome. I really love being there. If there was any disappointment for me, it was that I didn't have time to see all the other things that were there. But I did.
Your presenter.
They were amazing. So yeah, it was really fun. And for us, it's kind of a culmination thing because we do what we do a little bit. Of course, in the dark, literally, but we often do it at private events or off the grid, not necessarily in downtown Chicago, although we have done that. So Maker Faire Detroit was a chance to share with people who've never seen anything like this, never been to anything that's Burning Man like, never seen art like this, and it was awesome.
I imagine there's probably some level of kind of interconnection between those two communities, but there is still, like you said, a large portion of people that have never been to a burner event that will go to something like Maker Faire.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's a lot of crossover. There's definitely separation. And then I think also when you look at like Maker Faire Detroit is a perfect example of, then there's people who are coming to see the Maker Faire who aren't necessarily makers or don't identify with it being a maker or a burner. So they're just there seeing both communities and their eyes are, glazed over.
Out, yeah. That's something that we run into with I3 fairly regularly. You get people that come into the space to visit. They've never heard of a makerspace before, and it's kind of that odd kind of look of just everything that's available. Thomas, do you want to take a quick break for a PSA, or shall we continue right into the questions?
So actually, bit of a snafu that I like to alert people to that we're working on fixing in behind the scenes. This evening's video link was actually incorrect. We are working to fix that and get our audience back on track. That should be very, very shortly. PSA. Let's see. Oh, yes. So anyone looking to be on the show, we do have an open call for guests week to week. If you'd like to reach out and contact us, it's thomas.tusano@gmail.com. And if you send a email to that link with, subject of what you like to talk about and things like that, we'll schedule for one of the upcoming weeks and more or less get you on. So leaning into the questions as far as it goes, the one that we found picks up our pace pretty well and sets the tone for the night is, what misconceptions would you like to clear up about what you do? What do people automatically assume? And, what what would you tell them given the chance to explain to them like what it is? We had to kind of frame that question. We had a potter on, and we looked at her and said, you know, people must assume you just imitate the movie Ghost all day, right? And I went for a long shot, and it ended up being the question of the night. And she's like, yes, that is I get that all the time. So yeah, but what would you like to clear up about what it is you do with Captain Nemo's?
Well, so I'll just throw out two things. I think the first is that, you know, I mean, when people see this, you know, they're like, well, that's really dangerous. And I mean, obviously we're playing with fire, there's expanding gases, but it's all done according to specifications and codes and rules. I mean, you know, there's actually the National Fire Prevention Association, NFPA, has thousands of standards, of which NFPA 160 is the one about performing fire before a live audience. And you know, they literally list all the rules for all the pieces and all the components and how they have to work. And in almost all settings, including at Burning Man, there's an inspection of some kind where people are validating that the work that you're doing has been done correctly. So we make it look dangerous. But I think that, you know, it's not as dangerous as people would immediately assume. And then the other thing that I think is really a big misconception, and the thing that I think we're kind of about, is that people look at what's going on and they assume, well, I mean, you can do it, but I can't do it. And we're like, no, the whole point is you can do this too. That you know, we bought these parts at Home Depot. We learned how to do it on the internet. We studied with other people. We went to maker spaces. We went to events. And you know, the really, if we have one message at all, it's you know, be involved, get involved. You can do this too. You know, let us show you how. Let's teach you the skills, but you can do it too.
Hey kids, go home and play with fire.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
but do it safely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just so.
Yeah, that's something that I think we find with a lot of people who, I don't want to say aren't makers, but haven't discovered the thing that like they are passionate about making yet, is that they look at something that's been done and like, oh, well, that was so easy for you. Like, obviously I wouldn't be able to do that. And you're like, no, you have no idea how many times I screwed this up on my way to getting this right.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I know it's a
the
cliche,
journey.
but yeah, that's you know, I mean, you succeed by failing over and over and over again. And I learned how to do this by doing it wrong, you know, by making mistakes. And you know, in that sense, there's some danger. I mean, I think learning how to do this kind of stuff is dangerous, but done correctly with some knowledge, it's not. And that's what's awesome. So.
And that's the trick is that's a good thing for YouTube too, I guess, is it's allowing you to learn in a way that like these are people who have been able to do it right, and you're not just, well, I have some pipe fittings and some propane and I'm gonna go and play with that and see what I can figure out.
Right. Well, you know, and honestly, I think perhaps, you know, some of my first things were really as much engineering experiments for me as they were about having good knowledge. So, I mean, I did things that worked and that, you know, me and other people agreed were safe. But, you know, in retrospect, as I've learned more, there are even safer ways to do things. So I can still get better. But yeah, you know, I encourage people to get involved, and you know, we meet every week just so that people can get their hands dirty and learn whatever it is they don't know. So it's fun.
We, in this case, I'm just curious. This is other members of your carnival, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so you know, there's no membership.
Yeah.
Membership is I stood up and I decided to help. I mean, you know, we don't get paid, we don't pay. It's all volunteer. And, you know, when we perform at best, we, you know, like at Maker Faire Detroit, they paid, you know, our expenses, you know, so we got to come and we didn't cost us anything, but it was completely volunteer. So there's probably, I would say, about 25 people at any given time that are pretty core to the carnival. There have probably been, you know, maybe 100 people involved over the last 5 years. In some cases, people will come and they will want to learn how to weld. So they'll come in and they'll learn to weld and they'll weld something, but they'll never see the thing that they welded finished or even used. So it's also a social, it's a social club and a we spend a lot of time just working and making things, and then relatively little time getting to have fun and show them off. So yeah, it's open to anybody who wants to learn, and I mean it's primarily in the Midwest, mostly Chicago, but Michigan, obviously Detroit. We've been at Tangent and Maker Faire, and then in Rothbury, Michigan, near Montague, is where Lakes of Fire is.
We find that happens a lot at our space too. You get some people that are there almost exclusively for the social aspect, and I think for a lot of people, these kind of places become the third place for them, right? The not work, the not home, but the place that you go to socialize, because it's a very unique type of person, right? That you'll meet at these kind of places, and it's always interesting conversation. So I guess that maybe kind of goes into what I would ask, like, how did you get started? What inspired you to start with this? This kind of an offshoot of stuff that you do for work, or was this just kind of a thing that you saw somewhere and you're like, I want to try that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I was having coffee with a friend of mine, an artist in Pilsen, which is a neighborhood in southern Chicago, about 5 days before Halloween, and we decided that we needed to do something for Halloween. We should do something, and so then we talked about costumes, and then I said, it would be really fun to do something on the river, and initially we thought about maybe we could get some canoes. And that seemed practical. And then 2 police officers walked in and sat down across the way. And I looked at my friend and I said, "Hey, John, how big of a canoe can we have on the river?" And we proceeded to build a 40-foot-long, pedal-powered, fire-breathing dragon boat in 5 days, and got 20 people to go down the Chicago River. And that was my introduction to fire. And as a matter of fact, when we got there to set up, we picked a bank on the Chicago River where some homeless folks live, and they were so freaked out about what we were doing and carrying things around and wearing costumes that they called the police. And then the police showed up. And the police showed up and they said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "Well, good evening, Sirrah. We are but mere performers here with our fire-breathing dragon. Let us show you down by the river." At which point they called all the cops in the area to come. And then when all these cop cars rolled up, they're like, "You have got to come see this. Make it poof." So we made it breathe fire. And, I mean, frankly, everyone's response to that, I got pretty excited and I've never really looked back. So
something like that, I mean, that's gonna stick with you, and that's gonna definitely make you want to do more of it.
Yeah,
sounds awesome.
Because you get the first hit, man. The rest is history.
Well, and just as a sort of a sidebar to that story, so a few years ago, so this happened about 20 years ago. But so a couple of years ago, I was at I was just at a friend's house in Michigan. We were having a fire, some people over, and he said, "Oh, you have to meet this person." And he brought somebody over. And long story short, this person saw the whole thing from across the river.
You were that guy.
Because we didn't make it very far. And he was telling me this story. My friend said, "Hey, Greg, you have to tell Neil this story." So Greg tells me this story. So there was this dragon, right? And so he tells me the whole story, and I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." So I actually got to meet somebody who witnessed the whole thing. So, I mean, frankly, that's part of why we do it, is it comes back. It affects people's lives and in cool ways. And I mean, ultimately, that's what it's about.
Nothing more inspirational than inspiring the next person, right?
Yeah. No, it's totally true. And with fire,
dude, you can't go wrong. So
that's my feeling.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is rather obvious, but it's still on the show format, and we're nothing if not predictable. So what do you enjoy about what you do? I mean, you get to light things on fire mostly, but I mean, there has to be, is there an overarching thing to making and these effects?
So I mean, as a I think sort of what I get out of it on a really personal level, it's not already obvious, is I get to work on things that I otherwise don't get to work on. It's because a lot of people are working together. There's a little bit of metalworking, there's a little bit of woodworking, there's some computer programming, there's all different aspects. And in fact, everyone gets to dabble in and push themselves because, I do a lot of different work. It's multidisciplinary. And so I don't always get to dictate what I get to do. People come and say, here, make this for me. And so in this way, I get to do what I want. Obviously, I get to play with fire, and I mean, letting 30 to 80 gallons of propane off and setting it on fire at one time and being close to it is amazing every time it happens. And as I said, seeing how it touches other people, whether it's people who get to learn a skill and sort of they're helping behind the scenes, or getting somebody to come up and accomplish something because they ring the bell on the high striker. Or seeing a dragon in the distance on the river, and for just that little moment, your life gets to be magic. And so I think you're making magic, man. It's an amazing thing.
I remember Jan telling me and setting up the contact for you. She was like, and he's got this thing, it's that hammer thing at the carnival, and Jan gets Jan. Yeah. She didn't know what it was called. She's like that. That hammer with the bell on top, and you hit it, and then these strongmen were trying to make it go, and they couldn't. And so it looked like it required a lot of force. And Jan she's very excited and very enthusiastic and very much character. And so I was just listening to this, and I'm like, Jan, you already sold me with fire. But now I have to work doubly hard just seeing how excited you are about this. Like I have to make sure this comes through this week. so either way, that was you do have that effect, and I find a lot of artists love or should hear this from time to time. You are having that effect on the community, on our community, and you're across the river from us. You're a good few hundred miles that away. And so to see you have that effect, like I should tell you, because a lot of artists don't hear it enough. You do, man. Keep the work going as far as it goes.
Thank you.
So, welcome.
Do you find that like fire art seems to strike people in kind of a different way, like than other forms of art or sculpture that you kind of run into? I feel like humans have this like innate interest in fire and anything that like looks like fire.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, of course, not only do we gravitate to fire because we like it, but for a lot of people, especially so like I say, we do events at Burning Man and regionals and things like that, where it's pretty normal to have fire of a variety of kinds. But when we do fire outside of that context, it's so novel for people that they often can't believe it. So the dragon boat story that I just told you, still have that head, still use it. We were doing it on a porch in Evanston for many years with the permission of the fire department. And one of my favorite questions was, again, this thing is, I mean, I don't know if you guys are showing pictures or video, but I mean, people will find links. But, this thing is shooting fire 10 or 15 feet in the air, big ball of fire. It's loud. I mean, it's a very loud sound. It's a lot of escaping gas at, 30 to 50 PSI. And I mean, people are ducking. They're trying to get out of the way. And somebody said, "Is that movie fire?" And I mean, it's just swelteringly hot, and it's explosive, but people can't even believe that it's real. Same context. One year, some kids will come by very early because it's a residential neighborhood, so they'll come by early. So they got to see it, very young kids, and they were, of course, blown away. And then they brought their parents back later, and you could hear them about a block and a half away, where the kids were saying, "Come on, you've got to come see this giant fire-breathing dragon." And you could hear in the parents' conversation this attitude of like, yeah, we know. And they're expecting like a blow-up doll with one of those, sparkly things. So I waited until they all came around the corner, and I let off the biggest burst of fire I possibly could. And you could just hear them say, "Holy!" I mean, they were blown away. So yeah, people, they don't expect fire in life. We had the same thing at Maker Faire, and we had the same thing at Grand Rapids. People couldn't believe that it was real.
In a regular everyday existence, you don't run into certainly fire that large very often.
No, it's true. In fact, I should point out that, I mean, most people's experience of fire is lighting something on fire. So, which is wood or paper, which a match, which once you light it on fire, it keeps burning and it doesn't stop. And it can get out of control. What we do at Captain Nemo's is we play with what are called poofers, which is a very distinct thing from a flamethrower. A flamethrower is typically throwing liquid. It's meant to catch things on fire. A poofer takes LP, liquid propane. You turn it into gas. You boil it because it boils at room temperature, and then you store some of it in an accumulator, and then you let it go, and you get a big poof of fire. It all goes up, literally up in the air, and it burns up. So there's no danger of spillage. The danger of explosion is controlled through engineering and following specifications, but it's relatively low. People have these things sitting outside, by their grill. So it's common technology. It's well understood. But you can do really fun things with it. So it's not a thing that people experience as much as conventional fire. So
Sure.
I just have to say, I remember my dad did Carnival work, and he had the propane contracts. So you say some of these terms, and it's like setting off alarms way in the back of my head, like overfill prevention device, and you mentioned like all these like pilots, the combustion triangle, all this other stuff, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, people don't understand how safe propane actually is, like as far as it goes. It's like not. So yeah, it's glad to hear that from another person, like because all people are normally, you see a propane tank and people get like.
Because they don't see them in movies and video games, right?
Yeah, they see the little barrels and they're like, oh, you shoot these, it go boom. No.
Well, I mean, if you're going to shoot it with a rifle, it might go boom. But
Yeah.
in almost all conventional uses, I mean, they're incredibly safe. And in fact, when you see flame effects in a movie, it's propane. I mean, it's one of the safest things you can do if you're playing with fire in a theatrical way.
Yeah. So.
I guess I'm not really familiar with with this kind of environment, and I'm not sure if how many flaming reptile creators there are out there. But what kind of specializes you in the area that you work in?
You mean like what's unique to the fire that I do versus others?
Yeah,
Is that...
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Well, I think that obviously not lots and lots of people don't do flame effects and poofers. I mean, it's a relatively small universe. For the most part, you see a lot of stuff. You'll see, I don't know, Justin Bieber concert with pillars of fire, right? So you'll see that in a commercial sense, or you'll see Chicago Fire or some other show. So people work with it commercially for explosions and then also shows pyrotechnics. But I think what's really unique about what we're doing is that we make it interactive and we make it about game and fun. So you get to push a button, you get to turn a knob, you get to play a game. I mean, literally, we have a ping pong table with a net. It's just a row of fire, and you're playing ping pong over the abyss. So we combine fun that was already fun with something really strange. Beanbag, where you throw at the eyes and the mouth of a clown, and it shoots fire out of its head. So we make it interactive and entertaining, above and beyond just fire.
Are there any Carnival games that have eluded the flame effects that you have not been able to find a way to incorporate flames in a convenient way? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, that's a good question. So we try to do, the things that we make are usually, how can we take something that we think is fun? It has to make some kind of practical sense. It probably has to occur outside. So not all things are going to lend themselves. One thing that we tried and failed a couple of times was tic-tac-toe. Because if you think about it, what you want is tic-tac-toe. I want to be able to see it from far. Like it's theater, right? This is not like tabletop games. This is stand anywhere from 15 to 100 feet away. So it's ultimately theater. A lot of people get to watch, even though maybe only one or two people are playing. So it has to be something that people can see. And tic-tac fire, so we thought, well, we'll just have a vertical pane and we'll have X's and O's. And it turns out that all the fire just kind of bleeds upwards, which fire will do. And so it just was a mishmash. We wanted a kind of a video screen, and we put a lot of time and energy, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, that would be tough, I guess, because you'd have to have it laying flat, right? And then it's hard for anybody to see it unless they're like directly
exactly
above
flat
it.
works as far as fire goes, but now you can't see it.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say that fire it ultimately goes up, and so there's limits to what you can do with it.
And that way, flaming battleship sounds more easily achievable.
Ooh.
We've talked about flaming pinball, but we always twist it. So I want a 2-person pinball game up on a pyramid with giant fire, because you don't want the pinball machine to shoot fire in your face mostly.
Yeah.
Eyebrow.
Well, there's a great game that I've seen called Dance Dance Immolation.
Oh,
which you get to wear one of those silver suits, and if you screw up, you get doused with the flame. It's pretty epic.
It's like Dance Dance Incineration.
Yes. Either way.
Yeah. Point is, if your dance moves aren't fire, you'll be on fire. Like
you get to burn.
It'll be lit one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be really hot.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh boy. Do you know how many times I've had to resist the joke? It goes up in smoke. Like, do you know how many times? And now I've just caved, so now it doesn't matter anymore. But
you broke the fourth wall.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I'm just glad my monitor isn't gone from that one. Either way. Yeah. So, we normally ask, what the latest project is, and I'm sure people. We did promise you. We looked at you, and when we were introducing everything, and we were setting up the show, we're like, people came for the fire. We advertised fire. They got fire. But I do have to ask, Neil. There are other aspects to your making. So what's your latest non-fire project that you're really excited about?
Well, so right now I'm actually working on a non-fire project. Specifically, I'm actually doing the one of the things that the Carnival does is all of there's 50 or 60 different. So each poofer is as a solenoid. It's an electric valve that lets gas out, and there are about 60 in the Carnival, spread out across all different sorts of effects, and those are all controlled locally with a given game, usually with an Arduino. But they're all tied together wirelessly using ESP8266s or ESP32s and a Raspberry Pi with a custom server, all of which is my end of things. And so I've been spending a lot of time right now. The new project that I'm excited about that isn't fire but is fire is a small control box that I'm going to be able to hand to a DJ, and they can plug their sound into it. And then we have an organ that's got 12 pipes on it, and we also have an entryway that has 12 pipes on it, so like the scale. And then the sound from the music will be able to control these 12 pipes, and it's essentially a fire equalizer. So it's a fire thing, but I'm doing all the code, and I'm finally getting the chance to play with a bunch of code stuff that I have been wanting to for a long time and haven't been able to because, we're all stuck at home. So I've been spending a lot of time actually in my computer lab and have been really enjoying that. And so it will actually yield more fire, but it's not a fire thing per se. So on a completely, to more sort of generically answer your question, amongst other things, I work with a number of artists in Chicago, and right now I'm doing some work for a guy named MacArthur Binion, who I've been working with forever. Mm-hmm. And ironically, perhaps, I just came back from Italy in February. There's a church. It used to be a church. It was probably built 700 years ago by a stonemason. And then inside, and there's this arch, this huge arch. It's probably 15 feet wide and 20 feet high. And inside that arch, there's a gilded wooden frame. It's probably 400 years old. And the painting that used to be there is gone. So I made a 9 foot wide, 13 foot high arch top hickory panel that will go inside the gilded frame temporarily, and MacArthur will do a painting on all of that. And so this is one of these weird things where, in a way, what I'm doing is making a frame, and it's not necessarily exciting, but it's this culmination of working with this artist and his culmination in working for his whole life in the show. And so it's really cool to see all this come together, and eventually in the fall it's going to hang in Italy. So that's been a pretty fun project.
Well, okay. I've been waiting for someone to open this can of worms because I do woodwork, and we haven't had a official woodworking guest yet as far as things go. And we probably will still have another woodworker at some point. But like hickory, my first question is, how is it not? It must be working hell on your tools, because what I know about hickory is disgusting.
I have to change the blades all the time, and he specifically uses hickory because hickory. Here's a little tip for you. So there are 14 species of hickory, and pecan is one of them. And he grew up on a pecan farm, and it turns out that actually, according to all the lumber people I talk to, you can't actually tell the difference between one hickory and another. They all look the same and they all work the same. So this is his nod to where he grew up. But yeah, it's a really hard, dense wood. It's really heavy. I had all sorts of nasty splinters and have moved. Easily a forest of hickory for this guy. So.
I am sorry. I work with Wenge, I work with Benj, I work with birch and maple, a padok, babinga, and they've explicitly told me when I started, we will never work in hickory again. And everyone will do Kentucky coffee tree. We'll work with Wenge on the daily. We'll do canary wood, yellow heart, pacote, bloodwood, but we will never do hickory. And so I'm just sitting here thinking, like, this artist, I have a lot of respect for him and for you for working with this, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, dear Lord, is he a masochist? Like, is there something? You
just need sharp blades.
Yeah,
your blades a lot. That's all.
I know. Sorry. The one relatable joke as far as it goes, or comment, as soon as you said hickory and then Venetian church, and I was like, or Italian church, excuse me. Io sono capisco l'italiano un po'. As far as it goes, just okay, frustrating. But yeah, that is an interesting project. So, yeah.
So one thing that we talked about a little bit earlier was kind of how you would suggest that people that want to get into flame effect kind of stuff should get started, how to kind of learn to do it safely, and any suggestions you have for people in that direction.
Excellent question. So I mentioned this earlier. I mean, the guiding standard is the NFPA 160. That's specifically how flame effects that are going to operate in front of an audience are supposed to be built. I suppose it depends a little bit on how far away from this you are. So, I mean, if you work with pipes, if you weld or solder or use wrenches, and you've ever hooked up anything with electricity, then none of the things that you need to do to make this technology work are all that complicated. And so then it's more about understanding, well, how do I do this? The truth is that everything involved is rated for propane, and it's rated for the pressure in question. And you can look up all that information on anything that you buy. So like the primary piping involved in flame effects is standard black pipe from Home Depot, Menards, or Lowe's. It's Schedule 40. It's meant to handle, appropriate regulated pressure, and it's just the basis of all things. So, so all this is spelled out in the NFPA 160. Obviously, the Burning Man community or the burner community, I mean, it's what we do. So there's a lot of folks who work with this. I mean, there's a lot of folks in Detroit who work with this. I'm not gonna name any names, Scrubby Bubble, but there are definitely some flame effects people in Detroit, and it's been my experience that I mean, I love sharing what I do. I love sharing my knowledge. So I give classes locally, and also encourage people to come and just learn this stuff. People come and join the carnival because they want to learn how to do flame effects. There's also a couple of guys in the burner community who do travel around the country and teach really well organized and really great flame effects. Dave X and Propaniac are their burner names, and you can find them. By the way, this is not intended to be a plug, but poofersupply.com is run by Eric Smith out in Nevada, who's is or was one of the chief inspectors for LP licensed in the state of Nevada. He's also one of the primary guys who provides propane out at Burning Man. And so he supplies all kinds of parts and technology that get used in this art, but that he's vetted, and he said, yeah, no, this works and it meets spec. So just buying from them means that it's the right thing, at least as a basic, it works with propane. But a lot of the stuff that they sell, I mean, you can learn what the specifics are and find other parts and other things elsewhere. And there are, if you look up literally, Poofer Design, Poofer, Poofer Design, or Poofer Design Burning Man, you'll find any number of illustrations on, the basic, here's how this mechanism is supposed to work. And I have no doubt that there is an infinite number of links online where people could get started just looking to see that they're all built the same. They all work in approximately the same fashion. So finding the right parts that meet spec, putting them together in the right order, working with somebody who has some idea with what they're doing. It's all doable, though.
It sounds like the tools, for the most part, are things that like anyone who owns a house and works on it themselves would probably have at their disposal, right? I mean, there's not the components themselves may be a little less usual for someone to have lying around their house, but tool-wise, it sounds like.
That's actually a good question. So literally the only specialized tool that I mean is unusual that I use is I buy, a 20-pound or 5-gallon propane tank, your standard grill propane tank, new, so it's never had propane in it, and I remove the valve from the top, so that in that thread is the same as the thread for black pipe. So then you put a black pipe threaded pipe in there, you put a T, you put a valve, an electronic solenoid on it, and that's how you accumulate the gas that you're bringing in from your supply. And so I have a special tool to help me remove that valve. You don't actually need a special tool. With some straps and a pipe wrench and some heat and some other things, you can get it off. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I use some pipe benders, I use drills, I use wrenches, and but it's pretty common tools. Nothing really fancy, just having the tools.
I can not you're bringing back more memories of being 16, 17, working for my dad, devalving old tanks. Because that's you're right. It's a strap stand and a pipe wrench, and you just. But really, there's no need for a regulator in anywhere in that line. Like,
oh no, you have to. I mean, okay.
Sorry, I shouldn't be. I don't doubt your authority. That is not.
No, you're right. No. So I mean, I didn't talk about that. So I mean, typically what you would do. So the propane. What I'm talking about is the accumulator. So there's another tank over here that's my supply, and that's providing a regulated supply into my system. I'm storing whatever my regulator is feeding. But so a typical home regulator would be feeding out 5 or 10 psi.
Yep.
Usually 5, maybe even 3. I'm doing anywhere from 15 to 100 psi, which is still regulated pressure.
Yeah.
And then then the tank is storing that pressure, and then there's a solenoid that will release all of that. There's usually a secondary regulator that's kicking out more like 5 or 10 psi that's providing a pilot light, although that can also be done electronically. So it's not always a pilot light, but absolutely everything is regulated. You need Schedule 80 to the regulator, Schedule 40 from the regulator after, which means it handles 300 psi, and
Yeah, and then I apologize. I don't.
No, that's a really good question.
Yeah, no, I would never challenge a guest authority. I just know that, like, having grown up on a propane fill station, I'm like listening to you list off, and my brain automatically goes, "Wait, where's the regulator?" In the
Like, so, I mean, I've seen, so you can use Schedule 80, 600 psi throughout. You can use unregulated, straight out of the tank propane.
Yep.
But again, you would have to have approval, and I've only ever seen that at Burning Man. I mean, literally 300 psi out of the pipe. But that I mean, even I would step back and say, well, we're going to have to be extra careful. This is unusual. So only in very special circumstances would you have no regulator.
Yeah, no, and I was literally, I had muted myself to regulate chat, and I was sending the video link to my mom because she was one of the first women gas fitters in New England. And so I was sending it to her. I'm like, you got to watch this guy. This is interesting, like from a professional level. And then I didn't hear regulator in that list. And I'm like, what am I sending her? She's going to have a conniption.
I mean, Thomas, just to give you some perspective, I keep talking about, these 20-pound tanks. So for instance, when you do a Lakes of Fire or, at Burning Man this summer, we were going to be doing Burning Man, we will typically have a 250-gallon tank delivered. Yep. We have a 0 to 125 psi regulator. And we have a 75,000 gallon truck show up every day and refill it because we burn 250 gallons a day. Yeah,
I was about to say that should be par as far as it goes, because I can't imagine. I do remember delivering for the Carnival, and like being up in the truck in that size and moving around. I actually tell people that I would do the I don't know if they were now I can't remember, 100 gallons with the ones with the eyelets on either side.
So 100 gallon is usually a kind of a vertical tank. 250 is where they go work on.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, the 250s are the ones I'm thinking of. It's been a while, and I used to waltz the 250s into the truck by the eyelets into the box truck that we had. So you're the first person I've met who understood the term waltz when I refer to those things. You have to anyway. So yeah, and having to drive the truck. I wish I had pictures to show you of this thing, but you've seen them. But I'll share. We'll share later. And yeah, that's about what I would expect. And Mom's actually watching. She says hello. So she's already like, I'm already tuned in. What are you talking about? Of course I'm going to be looking at this. So, yeah. So, what else is there? So now I have to ask that. I mean, the 300 psi at Burning Man that you were mentioning, the numbers you were throwing out. This question, what do you view as the apex of your craft? What is like the high holiday, the end goal, the biggest? Like, do you have a pie in the sky show that you hope to do one day, or something you want to do with the fire that you think is it's maybe obtainable, but it's like way out there?
Literally this summer, I had scheduled, the Carnival was going to go to Burning Man, and we were going to be on the Esplanade, which is, I mean, if you haven't been there, we were going to be on Main Street, right downtown, which as part of a larger village. But so I was inspired 20 years ago, or, when I first went to Burning Man, and it was going to be an epic ending or closure to bring back something really great and be able to show it off to everybody. And we had actually I was also part of a group, and we were going to build a huge effigy, and it was going to have more fire, and then it was going to be lit on fire. And so the big apex you're talking about, we had it all planned, but sometimes things don't work out that way. So maybe next year, 2021.
Exactly. I was about to say, like, as far as it goes, you have the plans, and maybe you even have a chance, silver lining, you have a chance to look at them and work through everything as far as it goes and make certain, like, I know you probably already did, but, maybe even make them grander and figure out even more logistics that
oh, believe me, when they canceled it, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, now I have a year and a half to work on this.
But yeah, it's, oh boy, what else can I put in there?
Yeah, pretty much.
So
Novel
Yeah, no,
time, right?
I mean, now I'm like, okay, I want the Star Wars mind game. Do you know this thing where it's like an EEG thing, and you hold your hand out, and you make the thing float. So we want to hook that up to a poofer. We've got, I need the Infinity Gauntlet somehow, some sort of power glove where you can point at things. So we have a few new ideas that we'd like to integrate.
yeah, first Jedi I've seen, or first Force sensitive to use fire that I've seen as far as it goes.
Yeah,
So
well,
there you go. So all right. And then so the second kind of question that we normally lean into as far as it goes is I3. I don't know if you must have visited I3 for like Maker Faire party or something like that before, right? Maybe.
I'm not sure that I visited I3 or not. I mean, I, of course, met people who were part of I3, and I know what it is. I'm not sure if I've been there or not. I've been to any number of maker spaces that are awesome, so I'm just going to go with it's awesome.
Well, yeah. So, either way, one of the things that we love at I3 about makerspaces and about I3 in general is that it's a place where different trades and disciplines tend to intersect, and you get a lot of people. It's like the Roman Forum for a bunch of red greens, Adam Savages, and MacGyvers. Like as far as it goes, it's like instead of it going around in togas, we have like flannel and machinist onesies, and like I don't know, anyways, you get the point. So we end up with disciplines cross-pollinating. Like as far as it goes, I've had cosplayers that come back to the wood shop asking how to use the belt sander properly so that they can shape their foam on it. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what you do. And they're like, you don't want me gumming up your sander with my foam? It's okay. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. You're making something. Here's how to use it. And so we end up with this cross-pollination. So we have to ask, what disciplines have you borrowed from that, or what crafts might surprise you that people you share a lot in common with?
I think that the thing I touched on this earlier, but I mean, I think the thing that seems most surprising to me is that this has turned into theater. That as much as it's about fire, and as much as it's about fun and welding and computer programming, the part where it's actually the most interesting is where we can interact with other people. And so it's actually been, practicing theater skills. And it turns out that we need people who are performers to operate the games, because being a Barker or a Carney is about interacting with other people and making them and helping them have fun. So I think theater is the sort of most unexpected cross section. And as I said before, we weld, we do woodworking, computer programming, and then there's production and logistics and all these other things that touch on various aspects of what we do at one point or another. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. So we had another guest, Carmel, who is a stage right, and he talked about all the overlap with carpentry that he never expected, being a stage manager. And that was incredibly interesting too. We're always caught off guard. Jan looks at us, the sewing zone coordinator, and talks about how there's overlap between sewing and woodwork that oftentimes becomes very interesting. Like a scroll saw is nothing but a sewing machine for wood. Prove me wrong, Tom. And I'm like, I can't. You're right. It separates instead of puts back together. You're right. It's
same mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Same reciprocating. Yeah. So she actually wants to know, because I'm looking at chat now, because we're kind of puttering down on the questions. How about the quantity of propane used in an evening at a burn? So you said it was 250 gallons. I mean, have you seen larger amounts? Have you seen, what's the standard?
Yeah. Is there a standard? There's no standard. I at Lakes of Fire, where we perform most frequently, I mean, we're doing our darndest to set the standard. Certainly one of the best things is that, I mean, other people are doing the same kind of thing. And there is an absolutely a very friendly and very effective rivalry about, well, maybe I could bring more. Maybe I could get a bigger tank. Maybe I could put 5 on that. So that's actually really fun. And it's definitely not, it doesn't feel like one-upsmanship. It feels like inspiration. Like, you know what? I think we can do more. So that's been really great.
Give me a reason to pull out the 500. Give me a reason.
Right. That's right. So I, I saw something at Burning Man that, it was 3,000 gallons of propane and 800 gallons of diesel all burned at the same time. And no one's ever going to top that. Ever.
No, that's the Tsar Bomba. That's it there, folks. So.
Yeah, no, they changed the rules after that. So
yeah,
that was too big.
Yeah. My mom is also asking. So many. The pyrotechnics detail. My mom's just like, what could go wrong with all of this? And I'm just like, so earlier in the show, I don't know if she was tuned in to hear this. Like, they have to get certification from the NFPA, Ma. Like, it's cool. Chill. Like, we're good. So not that I talk to my mother like that. So as far as it goes, actually I do. She's like sitting there like, yes you do. What are you kidding me?
No, that's a fair question. I mean, asking what can go wrong. I mean, I ask myself that, and there are, not only do I hopefully know what I'm doing, but there are also rules for, rules of engagement, as it were. So, I mean, audiences have to be a certain distance. There's a safe, you're checking skin temperature to make sure somebody's not too close to a particular flame source. As you say, all the parts, and usually the fire department is involved in one way or another, actually doing inspections. So there are things that can go wrong, but there are many steps that you can take to prevent those things, like overfill prevention valves and fire extinguishers, and following best practices, and then also organizing such that if things go wrong, there's an effective plan and you can mitigate against danger. And worst case scenario, you know how to shut things off, and they're designed to be done so in a quick fashion. So try to take all those things into account and still have some fun.
So, Matt, do you have another? Do we have any more lakes questions pondering around?
Yes, one that I would ask, just maybe for some of our guests that are not as familiar with the kind of burner community. How would you describe, just we don't have a lot of time left. I know there's a whole lot going on at these kind of events, but how would you describe like a burner event or Lakes of Fire or anything like that?
So I think there's a number of different things that make them really unique events. First and foremost, they have a culture that if you are participatory and you buy into, it's different than the everyday world. The easiest, like practical sort of example I could give would be like a trust fall. You probably won't walk up to a bunch of strangers on the street and say, hey, why don't you stand in a circle? I'm going to fall over and you're going to catch me. You just wouldn't do that. At Burning Man, the assumption is I've got your back and you've got my back, and there's a gift-based economy. And so there's an element of I'm just going to trust you. It's a bit like a family reunion where you might see somebody who's your third cousin, but because they're your cousin, even though they're so distant and so not really related to you, you still treat them differently because they're family. So I think one of the key elements that makes it burn different is that it's a lot like a family reunion, and there's an element of trust and participation that is just not a part of most other events. It's not a thing to go watch. It is a sea of activity to participate in. So I mean, that's a defining characteristic of any Burning Man or Burning Man regional related event. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but that's one thing that really makes them stand apart.
Participatory.
I mean, I've from what I've seen of Lakes of Fire prep, because there are things that will empty events that will just empty I3 for like a week, and there's Camp Want to Make a Big Boom up north. There's Lakes of Fire. There's Maker Fair. I think there's one at Penguicon. So there's a few stretched out through the year where we just don't see activity in the shop as spiking as high. And like from what I've heard and what I've seen from Jan and David in prepping, it the gift-based economy, the charitable acts, the innate trust in the Lakes of Fire event, it's absolutely right, and it's something that I've wanted to. I mean, see, but again, you said it's not something to watch, something to go participate. So I'm trying to, as a woodworker, trying to figure a way. I always try to figure a way from my own trades and knowledge so that I'm in a comfort zone of at least having the authority of my skill behind me. So I'm still trying to find a way to participate, probably as a set or a camp builder or something like that. And I might ask Jan and David when this starts back up to try my hand. But just the allure of how you describe it and how some of the other i3 members describe it is strong. I'll put it that way.
It's I mean, I think anybody who's been to one of these events and spent any time and invested in it at all will tell you it's changed their life. It's definitely a different way of thinking about things and behaving and seeing things. I think the other aspect that's really defines a burn is participation. I mean, it's not about spectation. It's about get involved. What did you bring to the table? And it doesn't have to be something that's a skill. I mean, you could go around in the hot desert and hand out bananas to people who look like they're hot, and that's an amazing gift in the right moment. So I sometimes I think the thing that a burn can do is help people find, what's my skill? What's my thing? And it doesn't have to be, making things with your hands with tools, because I know that's what makers do, and that's what I do. But I think that there are ways to make that don't necessarily involve, tools and hardware. So seeing ways that you can give your gift to the world is definitely a thing that a burn can provide. I will just add that as a sort of sidebar. So, I know, and I don't want to, maybe you guys know, but there's kind of this pandemic thing going on. And so we can't get together. These events have been canceled. Everybody's doing things from home. And so one of the camps at at Lakes of Fire, they barbecue meat. They smoke meat. That's their thing, and they give it away. And so this weekend, a bunch of folks have gotten together to get money donated to buy some meat, smoke some meat, and distribute it to people who are shut in place or immunocompromised or just at high risk. And it's a way for us to have a lot of fun, to do something that you just don't do, and to give back to the world. So again, it's like, you can go to an event, and of course when you go to this event, it's a party, it's fun, it's super fun. So it's not the same in your backyard, but there are ways to have that kind of moment that you don't have to go to Lakes of Fire to be at Lakes of Fire, I guess.
There's still, that's why we've built this podcast every week, is because there's still a maker community at large out there. And that was part of the reason that me and Matt started it, is we recognized that i3 didn't have an online presence as largely as we could have, and so there was a void that we could a need that we could fill for our community and keep our members educated, keep people talking and the discussion going. And that was, as soon as the pandemic came down, Matt was like, do we stop? Or no, I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't put that on you. I don't think either of us looked at each other and decided, do we stop? We just kind of,
how do we keep this going?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Like, I shouldn't put that on you. That's why I stopped myself there. So we found a way to integrate into the community and to do this as far as it goes. With that, we are drawing to a close, and everyone gets used to my weekly spiel as far as it goes. We're getting close to the end here. So I'm going to let people know about this now. We partner with the Syn Shop podcast out of the Syn Shop hackerspace in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada, located at 1075 American Pacific Drive, Suite C in beautiful Henderson, Nevada. And that's Pong's bit, with Pong and the Mighty Pong and Crux. And so I put that link in the YouTube chat for people to go and check that out, as well as it will be in the video description. But I'd like to ask you, Neil, for a closing statement and what you'd like to make sure our community knows. What would you like to tell them, and how they can keep up with you?
Well, number one, keep making stuff, because that's what this is about. It's about making stuff. So get out there and make stuff. If you don't think you know how to do it, you're wrong. You can make stuff. Make stuff. Go to i3. As far as keeping up with me, I'm terrible at social media, but I am on Facebook. Captain Nemo's Flaming Carnival has its own Facebook page. Although that's not a place that we interact a lot, it's more just about generally announcing events that we do. We have an Instagram page, and also what code that I do winds up on GitHub. So I'm going to just guess, Thomas, Matt, you're posting links to all this stuff, so I don't have to like spell it all out. But you can find me on the internet. I'm easy to find. So
yeah, so, awesome. So yeah, as always, our guest social media is in the video description below. Yeah, and Matt.
To know more about i3 Detroit, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or wherever you get your social media. Links are in the description. And if you'd like to support us, i3detroit.org/donate is the place to go.
Yeah. And audience, as far as it goes out there, share what's been up in your home shops by tagging i3 Detroit on Instagram. Share pictures of your home shop or even pets and relaxation. Tweet at i3 Detroit or Tom Tusano and have it shared on next week's podcast. We haven't had any tags just yet, but we're hoping we will soon. And yeah, that's down below as well for everybody. So remember, everybody, as I said, go tune into the Syn Shop podcast, but more importantly, thank you, Neil, and continue making and make something wonderful and stay your amazing selves. And with that, as far as it goes, Neil, thank you again. Matt, Rob, our awesome producer, you're free to play us off and let us know when we go off air. But more or less, show's over, folks. Go check out Syn Shop and making awesome stuff. So Rob will let us know. He'll just ping us and be like, hey, you guys are off. But until that happens, yeah, we're just in here. So yeah, stare at the camera. Wave and say good night.